Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 71st ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by the Team 980 radio host, Kevin Sheehan. Kevin, it's great to have you on.
Hey, Matthew, how are you?
I'm doing good. I really appreciate you hopping on and getting right into it. You know, you've been a radio host for the Team 980 since 2004. I just want to start by asking when you first knew that you wanted to work in the sports industry and how would you describe the journey you've taken to get to where you are today?
My journey's been a different one, Matthew, than most of the people that I've worked with over the years because I was involved in a completely different profession
Hmm.
before this.
Yep.
I was involved in startup companies, tech startup companies, and this was kind of a second professional life for me. And I got involved because I love sports. I listened to sports talk radio everywhere. I wanted to do play by play initially, and that didn't really. I mean, I've done a bunch of play by play over the years, but what really became the opportunity was to, be involved in hosting a show. And
Mhm.
I was lucky, to be honest with you, to get
Mhm.
that opportunity because I wasn't going to move out of the market, to some small market. I was at a different point in my life where I wasn't going to do that. I had kids and a house and a family. But I gave it a whirl and it worked out. I was really lucky. But I love sports. I loved the medium of sports talk radio. Listened to it all over the country when I would be traveling for work, and I always felt like I could do it if I got a shot. But
Mhm.
the opportunity to get that shot was really very fortunate and sort of lucky overall. But yeah, I mean, I as someone your age, I love sports and I wanted to be in sports broadcasting. And the very first job I had was working in TV
Mhm.
for Steve Buckantz at Channel 5 doing sports, for newscasts as a producer. But that was kind of short lived, and then I went off and chased other things for several years before I got back into broadcasting.
Yeah, and then a little while ago, it was announced that Washington plans to build a new 65,000 seat stadium on the current RFK Stadium site in Northeast Washington. This deal will require approval from the DC City Council, and if approved, it's scheduled to open in 2030. If the DC Council ends up agreeing to this deal, how could this new stadium affect the overall culture of the organization and the fan base?
Well, for a large group of fans of a certain age, it's
Mhm.
very kind of nostalgic because
Mhm.
that's where I
Yeah.
grew up going to games and watching games. But it'll be different, it'll be
Mhm.
the year 2030. It's not going to be 91 all over again. The stadium will be a roofed, domed stadium indoors. It's going to be a beautiful area down there that'll be developed. But I think for the team, it's a big deal.
Mhm.
Winning is the most important thing, but getting back into the city, it'll be a great thing for the city, in my opinion, because that's an area of the city that's just been sort of blighted and needs resurrection. And yeah, I mean, Landover's been a disaster since the moment they opened up. But the
Mhm.
biggest part of the disaster is the team has been awful. If the
Yeah.
team had been good all of those years, we'd have great memories, even though the traffic would have been terrible.
Mhm.
But you'll have much more access, mass transit, many more roads to get to this new stadium. This new stadium will host a Super Bowl, more likely than not, at some point, a
Mhm.
Final Four, big events. It'll be great for the city. I'm looking forward to it. And for the fan base, especially people your age, it'll be, I think, a much better, destination to watch, hopefully, a really good team led by Jaden Daniels when they first move in.
And this new stadium opened up the opportunity to host the 2027 NFL Draft. What was your immediate reaction to this announcement?
I think like the stadium, we've all kind of been expecting something would be coming on that
Mhm.
end. But my first real reaction is just how many people are going to be down on the mall. It's going to be insane.
Yeah.
There will be, 300 plus thousand for 3 straight days, probably totaling a million or more. And it'll be great. It'll be great for the city. Again, an unbelievable spotlight on my hometown and how beautiful it is, especially at night, on Thursday and Friday night of the draft. So it'll be a really cool thing.
And I was talking about this with Craig Hoffman in terms of attendance. There's a lot of obviously major cities with major teams near Washington. You bring in people from
Right.
Philadelphia, New York, Pittsburgh. That's obviously going to boost up the attendance. And I do think we could potentially see a record beating the Detroit attendance from 2 years ago. And getting into the NFL draft, in the first round, the Commanders selected Oregon offensive tackle Josh Connerly Jr. Just over a month ago, they obviously acquired Laramie Tunsil, and then they still have Andrew Wiley and Brandon Coleman to account for. It's hard to imagine that Washington would ever draft a tackle in the first round to move him. And considering that Sam Cosmi's injury will leave the right guard position up for grabs, at least to start the season, what is the most likely fit for Washington at right guard to begin the year?
Well, I mean, I think Brandon Coleman and Allegretti will be the two
Mhm.
guards to start the year, and then when Cosme comes back, we'll figure it out from there. But the drafting of Josh Connerly Jr. was another investment into Jaden Daniels, their prized
Yeah.
possession. And it was also an indication, and I think the Tunsil trade was the first clue that they didn't really see Brandon Coleman as a starting left tackle.
Mhm.
And then we
Yeah.
found out they don't really see him as a starting right tackle either. But just investing in the trenches, both sides of the ball, but on offense to protect the player that is the most important player in this franchise right now. I like the pick. I thought it was a possibility. And I think as far as guard goes, I
Mhm.
would tell you that my guess is that Allegretti's days are numbered, that maybe
Mhm.
this will be the last year for an Allegretti and that Coleman and Cosme are the futures, the guard future for them. And Biotish, is under contract for a few more years. So things are looking up along the offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting into the defense, the Commanders also selected Ole Miss cornerback Trey Amos with the 61st pick in the draft. Amos is a press corner who possesses good size, and he'll most likely play on the outside across from Marshawn Lattimore. So there's a good chance that Mike Sanderstill moves back into the slot if that happens. What could that look like for Sanderstill this upcoming season in terms of on-field production? Obviously, going back to an area that he's played before.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, Trey Amos obviously has outside starting talent and potential. Sometimes it takes a little while for
Yep.
corners, so it's very possible you get Lattimore and Sanders still starting the year with, Igbenogany on the inside, and maybe Amos plays a little bit here and there, and Sanders still moves inside. We'll have to see. I mean, the
Mhm.
one thing we learned, Matthew, last week is a lot of teams kind of had Trey Amos off their board because of a back injury.
Mhm.
But Dan Quinn was asked about that over the weekend. They don't have a concern here. They ended up getting a player maybe at great value, end of second round. We'll see. Another position where you wanted to add, playmaking ability, speed, size, length, and depth at the very, worst case. Yeah, you got to be able to get after the
Mhm.
quarterback with pressure, and they lost 10.5 sacks with Fowler Jr. So hopefully they can replace that. But you got to be able to cover as well. I love the job Sanders still did last year on the outside. I thought that was a pleasant surprise because I think we all thought he would be an inside guy when they drafted him, but I think he can do almost anything. And I think the real important part of this upcoming season at corner is Marshawn Lattimore. What does Lattimore look like? They traded
Mhm.
a bunch to, at the trade deadline to bring him in. Can he be the Lattimore that we saw at times in New
Mhm.
Orleans? Because then you've got a really good situation if he is.
And then in the fourth round, the Commanders selected Virginia Tech wide receiver Jalen Lane. Lane is a slot receiver who gets the ball quickly off the snap. He ran a 4.34-second 40-yard dash, which ranked fourth among all wide receivers at the combine. Lane could definitely get some opportunities uh, offensively as a rookie, but I think his biggest workload is going to be as a punt returner. And after Washington lost both Olamide Zaccheaus and Jamison Crowder this offseason, what could that look like in the return game this upcoming season for Lane?
Yeah, I think you're right, Matthew. I think he is going to be their right now. He is their number one punt returner,
Mhm.
unless he does something between now and the opening of the season that
Mhm.
is different from what they thought they were getting. I think they
Yeah.
drafted Jalen Lane in part because he was their number one punt returner in this draft. And that's where they see him initially. Not that he can't play wide receiver, but I don't think they viewed him as a De'Ami Brown replacement. I think, without Jamison Crowder coming back, they needed a kicker and they needed a punt returner. And by the way, he covers kicks too. He can do
Mhm.
that as well.
Yeah.
So, another guy that if he can flip the field 2 or 3 times during the course of the season, it could mean the difference between, 12 wins and 10 wins. Who knows?
And in the seventh round, kind of making our way down the draft, the Commanders selected Arizona running back Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. You made an interesting point on your show recently. You stated that over the past 10 years, 33 running backs have been selected in the seventh round, and Isaiah Pacheco is the only one of those 33 running backs to make a real impact in the NFL. That said, with both Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler's contracts expiring after this season, what could Washington's backfield potentially look like following this year entering 2026?
Good question. What do you think? You think they should go after a Nick Chubb or a J.K. Dobbins and give them just a 1 year prove it deal? I still don't think they're done at running back. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think obviously they're going to bring in anyone before the start of this year. I think maybe they let Eckler go just due to age purposes. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, the only real role I think he's going to get this season is when Brian Robinson Jr. is injured or when he's tired. Because he can't be the third down back. That's going to be Eckler. And then we saw Robinson try and be the third down back towards the end of last year, and it was a really big fail. It felt like we were kind of giving up possessions in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I think it's only when Robinson can't necessarily be on the field. So if you maybe want to move on from Robinson and let Merritt take that role, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are good points. I think as a seventh rounder, the likelihood that he ends up being a significant answer is a long shot. But this was a very deep running back draft. And because he only played one game at Arizona,
Mhm.
may have been, an afterthought to some teams. Maybe he should have gone in the fifth round or would have gone in the third round had he played the whole year at
Mhm.
Arizona. You never
Right.
know. So there's that possibility. How about this one, Matthew?
Mhm.
Now that Derek Carr is out in New Orleans, what if the Saints decide we're not going to add any good quarterbacks? We're in tear it down mode to try to get Arch Manning next year in the draft,
Mhm.
and they make Alvin Kamara available before the season begins.
I mean, I don't see that necessarily happening. I don't know
I
how
don't either,
realistic
but what
that
if
would
they
be.
did?
Yeah, but
Hypothetical.
I mean, if they did do that, would you like to see Washington target him?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I think they need a different game changing running back,
Mhm.
on their roster. They didn't get it in the draft. Well, we don't know that they didn't get it in the draft, but
Yeah.
more likely than not, they didn't get it in the
Yeah.
draft based on history. I like the player. I mean, I think, again,
Mhm.
maybe if he plays the entire season, he's a fourth round pick or a fifth round pick
Mhm.
at Arizona. But just the idea of like Jaden standing next to in the shotgun, a real game changing running back, that's exciting to me, to go with everything else they have with Debo and Terry. And I just, availability was a problem last year for Brian Robinson Jr. and for Eckler. I like Rodriguez. They don't seem to like him as much
Yeah.
as, fans do. But I'd still, I'm still not discounting a chance that they do something before the season begins at running back.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the closest the NFL could see to another Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
I mean, if they wanna go for that, I'm obviously would be interested in seeing what that looks like. And following the draft, the Commanders signed various undrafted free agents, wide receiver Ja'Cory Brooks, Trey Rucker, or safety Trey Rucker, and defensive tackle Ricky Barber, just to name a few. Is there a specific undrafted free agent that Washington signed that you see getting the largest role or making the biggest impact as a rookie this season?
I don't know. I think that the rule of thumb is look to see who they gave the most guaranteed money to. And that's probably who they think has the best chance.
Mhm.
But we're talking about 1 to 2 roster spots, and I don't know that we're going to learn that here at minicamp. There are guys though, like 32 Walker last year. I'm forgetting somebody else, um, but there's always a chance that one of these
Yeah.
guys ends up making an impact.
Mhm. And I think, Yankoff was signed.
Yankoff, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was the other one who was signed last year.
Yeah.
Um, and then the Commanders re-signed Bobby Wagner to a one-year deal worth up to $8.5 million. Considering the level of leadership that Wagner brings to the squad, he obviously played a lot last year in terms of he was on the field for 98.8% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Maybe we see that decline in production soon, but how do you see this affecting the development of younger linebackers on this team, such as Jordan McGee or K. Madrano, who they just drafted in the 5th round?
Yeah, good question. I don't think they necessarily are worried about that because of how important Wagner was to the success last year and how good of a season he had. So I don't know that they're really worried about how many years Wagner has and does he stunt the growth of a player behind him, because I think Matthew right now they are in very much kind of a win big now mode. They've got this short window with Jaden under a rookie contract, and they've got an elite quarterback, and they were 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl last year. And I thought for sure that Wagner and Ertz, just to start with, would be priorities. I thought that Chin would be a priority too, but they like what they have in terms of his replacement. But Wagner, you could argue that Wagner, pound for pound on the team last year, was the fourth best player behind Jaden, Luvu, Terry, right? If he has another season like that, it just once again solidifies your chances to be a double-digit win team. And I think you can still get Jordan McGee into the game. And I'm interested to see what Jordan McGee's role is, because they liked him a lot last year before he got hurt.
And one of Washington's biggest needs entering the offseason was defensive edge, which they ended up avoiding in the draft as well as um, UDFA. Would you like to see Washington prioritize adding a defensive edge before the start of the season? And if they do, who could that guy potentially be?
I mean, the guys that everybody's been talking about, Von Miller's, Zadarius Smith, a guy like Matthew Judon, maybe these guys, are guys that would check out for them, and they'd be interested in. I think first they would have been interested in Myles Garrett had he been made available. Understand that when this season ended, adding a Laramie Tunsil on offense, they had already added Marshawn Lattimore, Debo Samuel. If they could have gone after a Myles Garrett, that would have been the big splash in defense, because I think they're trying to win big and win big in the next few years. I think they were interested in Trey Hendrickson. I don't know that they still are. And there was news today about Hendrickson and the
Mhm.
trouble that he's having getting a deal done in Cincinnati.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
did
if
see
that
that.
means Cincinnati's price will drop. Now we're talking about next year's picks, not this year's picks. I think he ends up in Cincinnati. I think that's the likely result there. But yeah, they didn't draft an edge or a defensive end because the best player on the board when they picked wasn't one. I think they would have had the best player on the board been one. Um, I also think that we never realize that what they have coming back, especially in year 2 of a system,
Mhm.
they view differently. Maybe they think Frankie Louvu is about to become a true star as a pass rusher. That even a Javante, John Baptiste, I know they liked him last year. That a Dietrich Wise might be a guy that steps up and ends up filling the role of Fowler Jr., but is a better run stopper at the same time. I think Dorrance Armstrong finished the season very well for them, played well in the postseason. So sometimes they like what they have more than we do coming back. But I do think that Myles Garrett would have been a pursuit for them, not to say that they would have landed him, and that they were interested in Trey Hendrickson as well.
Yeah, now last question I want to ask before we wrap things up. The Commanders acquired Javon Kinlaw in free agency this offseason, and then they selected Johnny Newton with the 36th overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. He ended up starting 11 games as a rookie, dealt with a few injuries here and there. How could the Kinlaw signing potentially affect Newton's usage entering his second season in the league?
Yeah, good question. I think first of all, they see Kinlaw as very versatile, being able to play end
Mhm.
and inside. Secondly, you need a rotation of players, along the D line, especially
Mhm.
inside. So you're never going to see, Payne and Newton take every snap, or Payne and Kinlaw take every snap. So you need that rotation, and they didn't have any depth there after losing, after John went to Minnesota. So yeah, I think they're still high on Johnny Newton, and I think they see
Mhm.
Kinlaw as big. They got bigger. That was a priority with Kinlaw and even Goldman to get bigger, to try to match up with Philadelphia's offensive line, in the division for
Mhm.
starters, Detroit's offensive line in the conference. Um, so yeah, I mean, Kinlaw was surprising to me because of the money, but they obviously see a lot more than just a
Mhm.
one or a two technique tackle. I think they see him moving outside occasionally as well.
Yeah, 100%. With that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
No, other than you did a great job, and I wish you the best of luck in everything that you're working on. Keep it up.
Yeah. Yep. I really appreciate that. Again, big thanks to Kevin Sheehan for being the 71st ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we will see you next time.